Hi, I'm Wyllie from Life is for Living, providing health, resilience and burnout prevention consultation and coaching. I'm here today to talk about life and death, and with me is Claire Bainton from ICP Celebrants. Hi Claire, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Hi Maz. Well, my name is Claire Bainton and I'm the Managing Director of the International Corporation of Professional Celebrants. And what we do is we officiate at life's events, predominantly weddings and namings, but we also cover funeral celebrancy as well. And obviously the life of what happens when somebody dies.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining me today. So I work a lot with people really emphasising the importance of living, not just surviving, but living, maximising the life that we have. But what is the role of our attitude towards our death in our quality of life? And that's what we're here to talk about today. So let's start by just having a discussion about the different cultures around the world towards death. Death is a big subject, but in some countries it's celebrated, in some countries it's not. In some countries it's talked about, in some countries it's not.
So I think for most people, especially families, the subject of death is very almost taboo, especially in Western cultures. As you said, around the world, different cultures celebrate it, they mourn it, but for the Western world, we kind of bury it, if you want. And people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it because they fear it. They don't want to accept that, unfortunately, it's the one sure thing in life that will happen to all of us. So they hide it away. Families say to me that they want to talk about what happens at the end of their life, but their children don't want to know about it. So I always say to them, well, you need to write it down, put your wishes somewhere. But I think it needs to go back further than that. We need to re-educate from a young age about the subject of death, because it can't be feared, because as I said, it's going to happen to all of us. And I think the more we embrace it, the more we recognise it, and the more we learn about it, and the knowledge that we can gain about what's going to happen, what our choices are, then I think overall that subject in itself will become easier to talk about, we'll become more relaxed about it, and I think the long-term effect on us when it comes to death will be different.
It's very interesting. There's a lot of research done into different cultures towards death. And a very, very interesting program I was watching a while ago actually showed that when people embrace and accept and talk about death on a daily basis, it increases the lifespan, the expected lifespan, which is fascinating. But it's very interesting. You mentioned modern and Western attitude towards death, and it's very interesting looking at the way we educate our kids around death. And I was thinking, it's a very kind of appropriate time of year at the moment with Halloween coming up and Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, the Day of the Dead. So for kids and for the upbringing and the education around death, it's very much that death is fictionalized. It's created around this scare factor, this fear. And yet we don't want our kids to be scared of death, and yet that's exactly what we're teaching them to do.
I think it's a cultural thing, to be honest with you. I think there's a generation gap here as well. For you and I, our parents probably never talked about death. You probably never experienced death unless you were poorly yourself, or unless someone in your family passed away when you were very young. Our parents do what parents do. They try and protect you against anything that is bad or sad or hurtful that could happen to you in life. But by doing so, they create that fear. When I started working as a celebrant, I started 13 years ago and I was doing 10, 15 funerals a week. But I was dealing with a generation of people who had been protected by their parents against death. But then when their parents passed away, they didn't know how to deal with it. They were afraid to talk about it. They didn't know what their parents wanted. They didn't even know how to go around arranging a funeral, let alone dealing with it. So going back to kids these days, I think the Education Society should really be looking at it on the school curriculum. They're happy to talk about everything else, but they don't talk about death. But we talk about Halloween. Halloween is a celebration of death, really, for most cultures. Kids wear scary masks and they go out being zombies and all sorts of different things like that. And they're not afraid of it, it's fun. But then the rest of the year, it's hushed away. Unless they're playing a game, a video game where it's involved in that, or they're watching a movie that they probably shouldn't be watching. Kids these days, especially in the Western culture, are not exposed to it. And I feel that that's where the fear starts. We as parents put that fear into them by trying to protect them. So if we could open up the eyes of the world to death and talk about it from a younger age, I think the fear of it would disappear. I think we'll know, even children know what death is to a degree, even young children know that, whether they've lost a pet or something. But I think to be able to talk about it and to be able to say, I mean, I talk to my son about it a lot, you know, and he gets quite scared about it at times because he knows it's going to happen. But he also knows that it's going to happen to all of us, and he also knows what I want. He knows what his father wants. He knows what his sisters want. Because as a family, we've talked about it because I work in that industry, and he's been exposed to it. So he's not shocked by it anymore. And I think if we could educate schools and colleges and even, you know, church groups, they always talk about it. Then I think we can eliminate that fear, and we can start processing actually what death is and how it affects us all in life from an early age.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that this fear is very much coming from lack of knowledge, and that's a generalization in life. We are scared of what we don't know. And, you know, very often the prejudice attitude, for example, towards people with disabilities, it's not necessarily a hate, it's a complete fear of the unknown, and I think it's the same where it comes to death. Interesting one there. So we're talking now about how our attitude towards death impacts our quality of life. So as somebody who deals with death a lot, what's your thoughts on how our attitude towards death actually impacts the way we live and our quality of life?
So I think for a lot of people it can create stress and pressure. Because
what can?
The death, you know, the subject of death itself, they don't want to talk about it because they're afraid of it. They put it in a little box in the back of their head, and then what happens is, when they do have to deal with it, it's stressful. That impacts the way they feel. Throughout life, I think the way that death will impact us is if we don't embrace it, if we don't talk about it, it will create that underlying pressure within our bodies. And we all know stress is one of the biggest killers in the world. And not just for the way that it affects your body, but the fact that stress can also be, for a lot of people, the cause of suicide, which again is death. And that is a death that nobody can understand. So I think we need to address how we look at it. We need to address the long-term effects that it has on our lives. And by eliminating the fear of it, that eliminates the stress. By learning about it, by gaining more knowledge about what happens, what choices you have. That again eliminates the stress of it and the fear of it. By looking at, people have this perception in their head that all death is horrific. You know, people talk to me when I first came into this industry, funeral directors would talk to me about when somebody's passing, it's awful, there's a strange noise, and you know, and I think they're increasing that fear. I have sat with many people who have passed away, clients of mine, family, even friends. And actually, I would say 99% of them had a very peaceful passing. And I think to give that knowledge to people that it's not going to be horrific, it's not going to be awful, then I think, again, people relax about it. To give them choices about how their end of life comes
Yeah.
is also a very big subject, and probably another one not to talk about today, but that again is
Yeah.
subject. In some countries like Switzerland, you will get the choice. If you're
Yeah.
terminally ill, you will get the choice.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, the rest of the world, that's a no-no. So it is all about education. It's all about teaching ourselves how to deal with it, but teaching others and learning the process of it, because it's going to happen whether we like it or not.
Absolutely.
You know, and there are horrific. Don't get me wrong. There are some very, very tragic deaths out there. You know, but they are very, very few and far between. And most people have a very peaceful death. And something where I've spoken to families and they've said, "Oh, mum just slipped away, and it was lovely." And I think those families that have experienced that open up to the subject, they talk to their kids about it, and that fear is eliminated.
Yeah.
And by eliminating that fear, along with all the other stresses about it, go as well.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. Another element which really looks at our quality of life and how death is, our attitude towards death affects our quality of life, is looking at people who have survived a near-death incident or a serious illness, something like that, and how their experience has changed their life. And I hear stories all the time about people who've survived cancer, for example, people who've survived accidents, and how that changes their life.
It does, yeah. It changes how they look at everyday living after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know yourself, you have your own experience.
Yeah, so I survived childhood leukemia, and most children have no idea of their own mortality at all. And I think, you know, most people get to their 20s, 30s, 40s before they even face the concept of death. And, you know, I can only speak from my own experiences and from the people that I've worked with in my career. But I very much feel very strongly that my experiences and my closeness to the end of my life really emphasized to me the value of being alive every single day of my life. And I have lived my life for the day, every single day. And I remember at the age of 7 asking my mother, "Am I going to die?" And
what did she say to you when you asked her that question?
It's very funny actually. She was honest with me, but before she even answered, I'd made up my mind.
Yeah.
I came to terms with it myself, and I decided I was going to fight. But it's this attitude towards death. You know, if I hadn't been through that, I would have been like every other child, living life, taking it for granted,
sheltered from the subject.
Exactly. And I think it does change your life. It makes you, certainly made me see things very differently, and value every single second of life. And as a result, I possibly push myself too hard and too far on a daily basis and need to take a break sometimes and just put you know, pull on the reins.
Because you have that understanding of how short and how fragile life actually is.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
Because at the age of 7, that door nearly opened for you.
Yeah.
When that door closed, you determined then, I should imagine,
Yeah.
that every single day was going to
Yeah.
be maxed out until that door opens again.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
a lot of people talk about that. A lot of people say, I dealt with a gentleman who was in a car crash, and sadly he lost his wife and child in the crash, but he survived.
Yeah.
And although devastation rocked his world for a while, I saw him a year later, and he was doing all sorts. He was climbing mountains, he was traveling, he'd given up his job, he wasn't in a new relationship but was open to it.
Yeah.
Whereas when I'd spoken to him after the funeral, I pretty much expected the next call from the funeral director to have been him.
Yeah.
But what he said to me was, "I live every day now for my wife and my daughter.
Yeah.
And as long as I live, they live,
Yeah.
because they experience it through me."
Yeah.
And I thought that was an incredible attitude towards it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was a good probably 6-7 years ago now. I know that he's married again, and I know that he has a family.
Yeah.
But I know as a family they are incredibly active,
Yeah.
and they do as much as they possibly can.
Nice.
So he had that wake up call,
Yeah.
you know, in not a very nice way, because
Yeah.
obviously he lost a lot. He could have given up,
Absolutely.
quite easily have given up, and most people would have understood it if he had,
Yeah.
but he didn't.
Absolutely.
Like you, he decided,
Yeah.
no, I'm going to fight against this, and I'm going to live life to the full.
It's a gift, I feel, to have that knowledge
Yeah.
that life is a gift.
And it
that
truly is a
every day-
gift to us all.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's very interesting. You mentioned earlier stress and the impact that stress has on life. Stress affects our quality of life, not just the extent of our life. And one of the things that we were going to talk about is the modern causes of death and how modern life affects our relationship with death. So just talking about how does modern life affect our relationship with death, I think a lot of modern life is encouraging us to assume that we are completely immortal. You know, we can pay for medical insurance. As long as we pay the medical insurance, we're fine, we're sorted, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to touch me. And it's this egotistical attitude that is very much, especially in developed countries, is taking over our concept of death, our attitude towards death. And I think that's removing a lot of the really important things that base us with ourselves, with life, and with reality.
You're right, because people do think the more successful they are in life, as you said, they can pay for absolutely everything, but your health is your wealth,
Yeah.
not how much you've got in the bank.
Absolutely.
And that's where you need to start with. You need to start by looking after your health,
Yeah.
because it doesn't matter how rich, poor you are, it doesn't matter what religion you are, it doesn't matter where you come from in the country, it doesn't matter if you're royalty or if you're a beggar on the streets. Your health is where it starts.
Yeah.
And if you get that wrong and you don't look after that, then death is going to come a lot quicker to you than it is anybody else.
Yeah.
There are no pocket in shrouds, so you can't take it with you. You know, whether you're buried or cremated, it's the same ending. It doesn't make a difference what's
Yeah.
in your bank balance.
Absolutely.
It's still an ending.
Absolutely.
So use what's in your bank balance to increase the way that you live your life in a healthy manner,
Yeah.
so that you can prolong it.
Yeah.
Not by saying, oh well, I've got 50,000 in the bank, I can pay for the best heart specialist
Absolutely.
if I have a heart attack.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to work.
Yeah.
That is just not going to work.
Yeah.
But if you pay that 50 grand to somebody who's going to monitor your health and look after you and your diet and your exercise and your stress levels, that is going to help.
Yeah.
And it's about looking at the different balance for the long-term effect rather than the short-term effect.
Yeah. And it's very interesting. So we're looking at the trends really in death patterns.
Exactly.
And modern death patterns are very much trending towards death by modifiable disease. Modifiable meaning that it's a disease that we can have an impact on.
Yeah.
So we're talking heart disease, we're talking cancers, we're talking diabetes. And all of these diseases, if we change our lifestyle, we
Yeah.
can change them. But this goes back to how we are in modern life, getting into the habit of relying on money and taking life for granted and just saying, well, if I get sick, I can pay for it.
Exactly. And it's about convenience as well. If you go back to, say, the 1940s or 1950s, how much obesity was around then, when people lived on real food?
Yes.
Meat and two veg,
Absolutely.
you know, they had breakfast, they had lunch, they had dinner, they had supper. I remember my mum telling me she ate 4 or 5 times a day and she was 7 stone. But they ate real food. Now, with life being so convenient for the way we are, look at the food we eat.
Yeah.
Look at the chemicals that
Yeah.
we ingest on a daily basis by eating food that's convenient,
Yeah.
rather than taking the time to prepare a proper meal.
Yeah.
You know, and it's those little things, and that's all about money. You know, we want to maximise our working day,
Mm-hmm.
so I'll have noodles for my lunch, or
Yeah.
I'll have a ready meal for my lunch, rather than taking the actual lunch break that you should take
Yeah.
to give your body a rest from your working day. Eat something proper.
Yeah.
You know, relax before you come back into the office and do your work.
Yeah.
And that's that roller coaster effect that money and our lifestyle in the modern age is giving us.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I do a lot of work with corporates emphasising the importance of bringing life back into the workplace, and the importance of living now. And so many people, especially in high-flying businesses, are waiting till they retire to start living, which is a really interesting concept, because statistics show that you are 40% more likely to have a heart attack or stroke in your first year of retirement.
Yeah.
And this is just it, this waiting to retire to start living, it doesn't work. It's showing complete disrespect for your life at the moment, and complete ignorance of and inacceptance of your mortality.
But everybody gears up their entire retirement package.
Mm.
So I look back at my dad. My dad was a military pilot for 35 years. Then he worked for the Royal British Legion, quite a high job in Cardiff. And his and my mum's plan was all about 65. At 65, they were going to have it all. They were going to travel more, they were going to have the caravan, they were going to go here, they were going to go there, and my dad died at 62.
Yeah.
So my dad actually retired in the August at 62 because he was made redundant, so that was brought forward.
Yeah.
By the October, he had passed.
Yeah.
And my mum was sat there thinking, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Because they'd worked their whole lives, both of them, they'd raised a family. And I mean, yeah, we did, as a family, we did a lot of travelling,
Mm-hmm.
but they had everything geared for 65. The insurances were
Yeah.
going to come out, pensions were going to come out, they were going to be comfortable. And I hadn't even bargained in the fact that one of them wouldn't be there for it.
And sadly, this is such a common story. We take life for granted, we live for that day when
Yeah.
we retire, and that day doesn't come.
No.
And it's about accepting, embracing mortality.
Because
and
tomorrow
living
is
that
not
life.
guaranteed for
Absolutely.
anybody. It doesn't matter how old you are.
Absolutely.
And when you say, and we've all done it, we've all said, oh, I can't be bothered today, I'm just going to have a sofa day, and we'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But what if tomorrow doesn't come?
Yeah.
And that's one memory you haven't created
Mm-hmm.
because you've taken for granted that, I'll do it next week,
Yeah.
I'll do it next month, or we'll go here at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And it basically just says that, you really have to embrace every day.
Yeah.
The dull days, the boring days, the work days, every day needs to be embraced. If you get up in the morning and you're breathing,
Mhm.
it's a good day.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also about, if you do need a duvet day,
Yeah.
have that duvet day, but embrace it.
Embrace it and enjoy it, but don't do it the next day as well.
That takes
If you're having too many duvet days, something's wrong.
That takes us really nicely, actually, onto the next question. So, in a culture which historically, excuse the pun, buries the subject of death, how do we accept death and embrace our mortality? And this is something that we talked about. We put together a list of some areas to discuss, because we know what the problem is. We've identified that a big problem is that in Western culture, in developed countries especially, we are not talking about death.
No.
We're pushing it to the side. We are not educating our children to face it, to understand
To
it,
learn about it and
understand
it.
to embrace it. So the first point that we've put is emphasizing meaningful conversations, pragmatic, open communications from an early age.
And I really think this is where the schools could kick in,
Okay.
because they've got they've got the captivated audience.
Yeah.
They've got the children in a classroom.
Yeah.
They can talk about the subject without making it personal to each child. So generalising it. So
Sure.
they're not frightening the child. They're not sort of sending the child home from school thinking their mum or dad or their nan and gran are going to pass away.
Yeah.
But giving them the education about what would happen if it did.
Yeah.
You know, if they did lose their parents. It's about the knowledge that they can instill in them and the fear that they can eliminate.
Yeah.
You know, they could start with, I mean, I know that in the UK, the Co-op, they do these fabulous books, and it's called Child in Death.
Okay.
And it basically tells a child in the form of a story about how to deal with death. And it's about a child and a bunny rabbit.
Okay.
And the bunny dies.
Okay.
And it's how the child deals with the death of the bunny.
Yeah.
And the process that they go through, the family bury it and everything like that. And they let a little balloon off for it. And, you know, and they give the child the hope, without touching on religion, that spirit of that creature has gone, but the memory of the creature is still here.
Sure.
And as long as the memory is still here, then you kind of don't really lose the person or the bunny.
Yeah.
And it goes on that. But they've looked at it that way. But I do think schools need to put it on the curriculum. They need to address it. And I think there's lots of ways that they could do that.
Yeah. I think one of the barriers to that is the very varied cultures within schools. And I think it's, yes, I completely agree that that increased awareness and information does need to get out to our kids. How we do it in a sensitive way, which caters for
that will be the difficult side of it. Is catering for all cultures.
Yeah.
And really, there are some subjects in all cultures that can be generalised and catered for. Death, I don't think, is one of them, because in the Western world there are a multitude of different religions and different beliefs, and in sort of other parts of the country, you know, so many different cultures and religions have their different way of looking at it. Yeah. But it's nothing to stop schools getting people in from different religions, different cultures to do that lesson. Yeah. They don't all have to have that lesson together. Yeah. And then the sensitivity of it is being addressed and recognised for each child rather than generalising. Yeah. So we look at where the child comes from, what their background is, what their religion is, what their faith is. Yeah. And look at it and address it from that angle rather than generalising. Because I think with death, you can't generalise. You know, it does affect every single person in a different way. Yeah. I mean, I might deal with it, having worked in the funeral industry for 13 years, there's a lot of people who think Claire can deal with death really well because she does it every day. But actually, I don't deal with death very well at all because I deal with it every day as a professional capacity. Yeah. When it happens at home, it kind of hurts even more because I now know the full process. And that's where too much knowledge can be as bad as not enough. Yeah.
It's very interesting. So you mentioned this everyday element, and the programme I referred to earlier looked at civilizations that live and face death in conversation every single day. Yeah. And I thought about that and I just thought, well, how can we do that? How can we put death into a daily conversation? And it's an interesting conversation to have, and that's not something I can dictate for every family because it will be different for every family. But for example, if there's an elderly person in the family, if there's a grandfather, grandmother, talking about them coming to the end of their life and facing it and embracing it. And I think there's also the element of we have a tendency to shun conversations which, let's change the conversation, that's too morbid. And I challenge that. Let's challenge the morbidity of death. Yeah. It doesn't have to be morbid. It's beautiful, it's part of life, it's the one thing that every single one of us will go through. It's the one thing we all have in common.
It is, and I think if you're lucky enough in this life to reach old age, and I really think if you reach old age, you are lucky. You've done something right. And the amount of elderly people that I've worked with, they want to talk about it. They want to share their memories. They want to tell their children the stories that they had. And I think if the children basically sat down and said, "Oh, Mum, tell me about what it was like when you were a child," and took little notes quietly or recorded it, I think they would be thrilled. Because I think there's so much that they want to say, and they know they're coming to the end of their life.
Yeah.
And I think once you know you're coming to the end of your life, you do accept it.
Yeah.
Like I've dealt with a lot of cancer patients who know, and they do know. Where the doctors say you've got 2 months, 6 months, they know when it's coming. And so many of them have said to me in the past, some of them have even had what we call living funerals, where they've celebrated it and they want to be there. So they've had a big party and everything beforehand, which actually a lot of families are quite horrified about. But when they do it and they've enjoyed it, they can actually see where the person's coming from. But again, you know, going back to the elderly, I do think it's important that we talk to them about it. I do think that question needs to be asked. You know, what do you want? You know, when it does happen, hopefully not today or tomorrow. What do you want, Nan or Gran or Bampy or whatever you call them, Mum or Dad? Ask the question. Put it out there. Give them the opportunity to come back and say, "Do you know, actually, I don't want to be buried. I want to be sprinkled across the beach in Dubai, preferably Jumeirah."
But then it also, you know, I think it's about bringing it back, not only the elderly as well, embracing the concept, facing the concept throughout life, having conversations with friends, with family. What would be your ideal way of dying? You know, if you could choose how you die, what would you choose? And making these questions, these conversations, part of our living.
Or what would you want? You know, do you want a horse and carriage? Do you want to go on a minibus in the back of a white van? You know, what do you want? How do you want it to be? Because that is the greatest gift that you can give somebody who is poorly or who is coming to the end of their life, is to actually be quite, not jovial. I don't want to say jovial and mean it's, you know, it's disrespectful, because it's not about being disrespectful. It's about embracing it. And it's about, it's not a horrible thing. So what do you want? Tell me what you want. What music do you want? What do you want me to say? Oh, you're going to trust what I'm going to say about you. You better write it down. You know, give people that option. Lighten the load a little bit. Because yes, it is a serious subject. Yes, it's a subject people don't want to talk about. Yes, it's a very sad subject and devastating for many. But I'd rather leave this life on a high, knowing that I've got full control of what happens once I've gone, because I've left specific instruction to my family. And what about families where there are nobody? What about people where they haven't got family, or they've fallen out with their families? You know, there's got to be something out there where they can say, actually, I'm going to put all this down. This is what I want.
But then it's still possible for people to embrace that concept of death, and I think this is the important thing. It's the importance of your attitude towards death does impact your quality of life.
Exactly.
And another element that we looked at, which really does impact that, is mindfulness. So mindfulness is focusing in on ourselves. It focuses on our breath. It focuses on our existence now. Our existence now, we might not be in existence in 5 minutes' time.
Exactly.
In focusing on our breathing now, we are focusing on life-giving air that is coming into our lungs, keeping us alive. Life. Without it, we have this concept of death. And I think mindfulness is a really positive tool to emphasize our mortality, to really build ourselves a quality of life and awareness of quality of life.
And with that in mind, I tell you what they do in the UK, which, you know, I've been to a couple, but, you know, some successful, some not so successful. There's a brand in the UK and they call Death Cafes. And they kind of have these coffee mornings where you can go along with like-minded people who want to talk about death and talk about it. And they have guest speakers like funeral directors, celebrants like myself have been and had a chat about what's available, what your choices can be. I actually think that's a really good option, because those that want to embrace it and talk about it can go to things like that. Those that don't need to.
But
I like that. I think it's something that, you know, I think it's something that we should look at.
Yeah.
doing a death cafe.
But it's also something that you take that concept, and how do you take that concept and bring it into your family, bring it into your friends? It doesn't have to, I mean, please don't talk about death every single day, every single minute of every
because
day.
we want to talk about life and we want to live life, you know, but
Absolutely.
we need it to not be a taboo subject.
Yes, absolutely.
We need it to be as comfortable to talk about death as it is to talk about going to Tesco.
Sure. And that takes us really nicely on to the next one, which is celebrating life.
Yeah.
And we've already talked about people who might want to have a life celebration instead of a funeral. But we don't have to wait until we're old to celebrate life. We can celebrate life every single day. And that, I guess, is tied up with gratitude.
Yes.
And the power of gratitude and the impact it has on our everyday life, tied into mindfulness, is there's so much research that's now coming out on the impact that it has on our lives. But accepting the positives in our life and the gratitudes that we have for life. Wow, that was a great day. I'm grateful that I'm breathing. I'm grateful for the sun shining. You know, these gratitudes
All the rain.
help us to really emphasize that we are alive now and accept that we might not be in the future.
And live every single day as your last.
Exactly.
You know, and people say these little tiny sayings, oh, you need to live every day as it's your last. But we do.
Yeah.
You know, and I think for a lot of people get caught into the mundane, everyday life. You know, the washing, the shopping, the work, the school run, the kids, you know. And I think to a degree they forget that we build these lives together as a family or as friends. We try to be successful so that we can embrace life and enjoy the life that's available to us.
Yeah, yeah. So that takes us to another one, which is embracing our limitations. And this is something that I talk about a lot with corporates, because corporates have this tendency to push their limitations, which then pushes them into burnout.
Yeah.
And the ultimate limitation is death.
Without any shadow of a doubt.
By embracing our smaller limitations, you know, our need for 7 to 9 hours sleep every night, our limit on how much work we can do every day, our limit on how long we can go without food and water. These limitations are the smaller limitations. If we can start embracing these on a daily basis, we are more prepared to embrace our ultimate limitation, which is the limitation of our life.
I think it's about balance as well. And I think this is where limitations come into play. It's all about balance, work-life balance, physical balance, your healthy side of you, you know, balance, your naughty side of you that, you know, will eat that cream cake when you know you shouldn't. It's all about balance, everything in proportion. And I think once you learn how to do that, once you learn how to proportion your life so that you've got a steady balance across the entire sections of your life, then you see a difference.
Yeah.
Because then you are experiencing happiness, but you're still working hard, but you're holidaying, but you're enjoying your family time, but you're enjoying your own time. It's about balance, and I think that is the hardest thing that people in life struggle with. They struggle to find that even keel. That yes, I want it all. We all want it all, and anybody that says they don't is fibbing. We all want the best of everything. That's what we exist for. That's what we're brought up for. That's how society creates us. But without that balance, you're going to get that level, the burnout, the stress. The stress and the burnout together will result in illness. The illness will result in death, early death. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you bring up this concept of work-life balance, because this is something that I coach against. The reason being, the idea of work-life balance suggests that work and life are two separate things. Now, if work is separate from life, you do not have life in the workplace. So my priority is bringing life back into the workplace. And actually looking at all of these things, you know, celebrating life, education, gratitude, mindfulness, embracing our limitations, it's about, yes, there's balance. I completely agree that we need balance, but it's about bringing these really key life functions and making sure we have them in the workplace. So we are not separating when we're at work, we turn everything off.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that. It's like that idea of waiting until we retire to start living. And it's about bringing these elements into work. We work so much of our life that we have to bring these in to the workplace to make sure we are living while we are at work.
And I agree with that totally. I suppose I look at it differently because when I'm at work, because I love what I do and I enjoy what I do, I call it work, but it's not. It's part of my life. It's what I do, it's who I am. I suppose those attributes come into play when there are people in jobs where they hate their jobs, but they don't really have any choice or option, although I always think there's choice and option. But how many percentage of the world are in jobs that they get up in the morning and they think, I can't wait till 5 o'clock? I'm fortunate. I don't feel like that. I get up in the morning and think, oh God, can I finish at 5 or should I go on till 7? Because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. So for me, my work-life balance is about me and who I am and how I spend my day, you know. So, and I do understand how fortunate I am for that.
Good. So the next one, and we're looking at tools really to bring a positive attitude towards death, is connecting with nature. And a tool that I use a lot, and I would say the most positive and powerful tool I've ever used, which is adventure therapy. So connecting with nature emphasizes to us the natural flow of life and death. You know, if you are around plants, you will see plants live, you will see plants die. Same with animals. You will see plants get old, animals get old. And just connecting with nature in that way really emphasizes to us that natural cycle that we are part of.
Well, that is the circle of life.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? That is everything that lives, grows, gets old, passes, and regenerates.
Sadly, we are more and more disconnected from nature, which is impacting our awareness of our own mortality and our own life cycle. Adventure therapy takes people into the outdoors and changes their life through sport and connection with the outdoors. Another great example is putting our lives in perspective. If you are up the top of a mountain with no technology to look after you, no bank balance available to get fast food on the way home, it really emphasizes to you how small you are. And this element of emphasizing your mortality is really powerful, really, really powerful. It emphasizes our complete insignificance and how dispensable we are. And so many people spend their life in a job really feeling that they are everything. And yet, once we're gone, the world still continues, our work still continues, our company still exists. And it's really embracing that element that we will go one day, but everything else will continue. And certainly connecting with nature and getting into the outdoors can really help to put things in perspective.
And I agree with that. And I mean, it's like when you look at grief, so many people deal with grief in such a different way. You know, some people get angry, some people get upset, some people deal with it immediately, some people deal with it 10 years down the line. But in what you're saying there about being indispensable, of course you are. I worked for a major airline for 25 years, and it wasn't until the last 6 months of that 25 years that I actually realised I was just a staff number. And all the commitment and all the things I'd sacrificed to be at that job was irrelevant. Because when I actually handed my ID in on the last day, I didn't even have a manager come out and say goodbye or thanks very much for 25 years of your life.
Yeah.
So I get that, definitely. And that's why I think I'm lucky now that I'm in a job where that would never happen.
Yeah.
So I get where, you know, going back and being part of nature will show you that you are just part of the bigger circle.
Yeah.
And we're all just part of the bigger circle. And that goes right back to being successful. It doesn't matter how successful you are,
Yeah.
or whether you're the pauper on the street, you're still part of that bigger circle.
Sure.
You see?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. So we've identified the need to really face death and bring it as a bigger part of our culture, as our daily, weekly, monthly conversations. And it's interesting because awareness of mental health is definitely growing, especially post-COVID. And it's going to be really interesting to see how our attitude towards death changes along with this awareness of mental health.
Well, I think what awareness of mental health has started to do for people, it's almost been a permission giving.
Mm-hmm.
People now have the permission to say how they feel.
Sure.
And I think with that will come so much more.
Yeah.
Because people will then feel, well, I can talk about my mental health. So if I'm afraid of death, I can talk about it now.
Yeah.
It's something that plays on my mind, I can talk about it.
Yeah.
So that awareness to mental health has opened up a huge environment now where, yes, it's okay to say how you feel.
Yeah.
People are now not persecuted for saying, well, I'm afraid of spiders, or I'm afraid of this, or I don't want to be on my own in the dark.
Yeah.
You know, now it's okay to say it. For men especially,
Yeah.
mental health awareness for men has grown, I think, more rapidly than for women. Because as women, we always talk. We talk amongst women, whereas men, they kind of don't.
Yeah.
So this openness of mental health now has given them an outlet.
Yeah.
And they now feel that they can say how they feel. They can talk about their fears, their anxieties. And so I think with that in mind, I think the conversation of death will become more popular as people start to open up themselves and be who they really are and not who they think other people think they should be.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, good one. Wow, fantastic conversation and really, really interesting. Is there any one thing that you would like to say to end the conversation?
I just think that sadly death will come to us all. You know, it doesn't matter who you are, it will come to us all. And I just think that it shouldn't be a taboo subject. Tell your family, tell your friends that you love them. Tell them what you want in life. Talk about it. And if you don't want to talk about it, excuse me, or they don't want to talk about it, write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, when that day comes, those people will be so grateful that you did talk about it.
Yeah.
Or that you did write it down. And the best gift you can give to someone who's passed is their final wishes.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid of achieving that for them. Because if you achieve that for them, the way that you deal with their death will be far more pleasant than if you don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we all need to think about. You know,
Yes.
if you can't give someone their final wishes, that'll play on your mind.
Yeah.
So to give them what they want, and the only way of giving them what they want is to ask.
Yeah.
So ask them,
Yeah.
write it down, and then go get a gin tonic.
Nice. What a fantastic conversation. And a last word from myself, I guess. We've talked a lot about death, and we've really emphasised the importance of emphasising life. And this is a motto which I've really lived my life by, and I've learned from a very young age, is that life really is for living now.
Now, every day.
Yeah. What a great conversation.
No, thank you.
very
Enjoyed
much.
it. Thank you. Thanks.